it'll just flop right out of the machine.
As I top stitch, oh, sorry, I didn't move you far enough. Underestimated my girth. You hold your basket up. Okay. Hi, crafty people. Today we're sharing with you how I made our lovely Easter hunt baskets. These baskets can be made as a sewing version or a no-sew version, and I'll be sharing both of those with you today. I'm also sharing with you the pattern for these baskets, so if you're keen to make it yourself, the link will be in the description box down below so you can access the pattern and follow along with the tutorial that I'm making it with you. I've made these baskets using a really thick felt on the outside, and then I have lined them with cotton to make it look nice and pretty on the inside and to customize it for each of the kids. But if you would like to, you could use cotton on the outside and just use interfacing to thicken it up so that it keeps the structure of the basket. If this is your first time on my channel, then welcome. My name is Marie, and this channel is all about motivating mums to make and mend. I have 3 of my 4 kids with me today. I have Elijah, who is 4.5, Isabel, who is 3, and Alice, who is running around, is 1.5. Do you want to come up here? No? No. Okay. Our 6-week-old Reuben is asleep right now. I hope you enjoy watching this tutorial, and if you do, don't forget to press like so I know that you have enjoyed this video. So, with all of that being said, let's get making!
My mum makes Easter baskets.
I'm going to start showing you through the process of making these Easter baskets by going through the materials you need and what pattern pieces to cut out of each of them. You're going to need 2 different sorts of fabric. First, you're going to need a 3mm felt, which is a nice thick firm felt, so that when you sew it, the basket will hold its structure. And you'll also need a lining fabric. I'm just using cotton poplin. You could use quilter's cotton, anything like that. I've loved the gingham fabric that I've used, and for this one today I'm going to be making it out of this lovely white floral pattern, which I think is nice and Eastery, but you could use any just random scrap fabric that you have. I have here the pattern that I'm going to cut out. Now don't worry, if you do want to use this pattern, I do have it linked down below, and it's not going to look like this. You can download a nice PDF version. This is my template that I made on the back of one of my kids' artwork, but you can download a nice crisp clean version of it down in the description box below. To make this Easter basket, you're going to have a few different pattern pieces. First, you're going to have the hexagonal flower shape, which you'll need to cut out of the felt and out of the lining fabric. You'll also have a handle piece that you'll cut out of the felt. You'll also have 2 different ear pieces. One is the larger external part of the ear, which you'll cut out of the felt, and the smaller internal part of the ear you'll cut out of your lining fabric. You'll need 2 of each of these. When cutting my hexagonal flower shape out of my felt, I am folding these tabs down because I don't need to cut them. They're just for the lining pieces so that we can hem the lining, because the cotton will fray. Felt won't fray, so I'm not needing these extra tabs. You'll see a little bit later what I'm meaning. So to cut out your felt, fold these tabs down and cut your hexagonal shape out. Cut out 1 handle piece and 2 of the larger ear pieces. Then on your lining piece of fabric, you're going to open out the flaps and include them in your lining piece. Cut out 1 of these flower pieces from your lining fabric, also cutting out 2 of the internal ear pieces from your lining as well. Now that we've got all of our pattern pieces cut, we're going to start by gluing the ears together. To do this, you'll need to glue the internal part of the ear onto the external felt part. We're gluing these on first to make sure that the glue dries before we sew these through our sewing machine, although I guess that won't matter for you if you're doing a no-sew version of this basket. Next, we're going to take our lining piece and we're going to fold the tab edges down and iron them flat. This will help when we come to hem it later, because the edges will all be pressed, because once it's sewn as a basket shape, it'll be a lot harder to get the iron into it because it will be sort of 3-dimensional. So we're going to fold the tab over where the V shape is, pressing it to the back, and then ironing it down so the tab flaps are all facing the back. The reason we've only cut these tabs here on the lining fabric is because the lining will fray. So we're going to hem it in order that the fraying isn't visible. Whereas the felt isn't going to fray. So we were able to just chop where the side of the basket will be, knowing that the edges won't fray. We don't need to fold it over and hem this. The next step is to take your lining piece and to sew it together in its basket shape. To do that, we're going to need to join together each of these sides. So I'm unfolding the hem that we have just creased with our iron and matching them together with the one next to it. Then I'm sewing down the sides of each of them individually I'm starting on the outside hem piece and sewing down to the middle, and when I have closed the hole over completely, I take my needle out and then join the next pair together and sew down that side as well. To sew the sides together, I'm using an over edge stitch, or you could use a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine if you don't have the over edge stitch. This helps to ensure that it won't fray, and it also is going to be a really secure stitch so that it doesn't fall apart. Now that the sides of your lining are all sewn together, we're going to hem the top. To do this, fold the edge over where we had ironed it before, and we're going to hem along that edge. Having pre-ironed it, we already know how big of a hem we're leaving, and I'm just sewing around each of those edges about 1 centimeter from the edge, although it doesn't really matter how far away it is. As I get to each side where the fabric joins, I'm putting my needle in and then pivoting my fabric before I go along the next side of my fabric. And then once all of the 6 sides are hemmed, then your internal lining is all ready to be placed inside your basket and sewn together. We're going to take our ear pieces and sew along the outside of the internal ear to attach it more securely to the external part. Again, if you're doing the no-sew method, then you won't need to do this part. To attach the internal ear to the external part, you're going to sew along the edge using a very small, narrow zigzag stitch. I've remembered to change the bobbin out so that it matches the back of my fabric, so in this case it matches the grey of the felt, whereas my top thread is white to match the lining, and you can use whichever top thread colour matches your lining as well. To give the ears a more three-dimensional shape, we're going to fold the outer edges towards the middle so that they touch at the centre, and then sew a zigzag stitch along the bottom to keep it securely in place. We're going to do this along both of our ears, and then they will be done, ready to attach to our basket. Again, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch for this, but because it's going to be placed between our outer and inner lining of the basket, you won't actually see the stitching, so don't worry too much what colour thread you're using. It's just to hold it in place before we sew it onto the actual basket. Now we're ready to take our main basket piece of felt and sew it together in a very similar way as when we sewed our lining. I'm going to line up each of my sides one at a time and sew an over edge stitch, or you can use a zigzag stitch if you like, or you can use glue if you're doing a no-sew method, to attach the sides together one at a time. Once I have sewn one side, I move on and attach the next side to each other, moving around the whole shape until I have attached all 6 sides together to create our basket shape. Once you've sewn the edges of your basket together, it's ready to be turned in the right way so that your stitching is on the inside of your basket. I also didn't mention what type of needle I was using. I'm just using a standard universal needle, but if your machine seems to be struggling with it, you might like to change to a thicker needle, but it will make bigger holes in your fabric, so you have to keep that in mind. You might want to do a few test runs and see what it looks like. Or you could swap to a more heavy duty needle, like a jeans needle or something like that, more for heavier weight fabrics. So your basket will now look like this. It holds its structure really nicely because it's nice thick felt. And now we have all of our elements complete, ready to sew them all together. Actually, now looking at this, I made a mistake, because in the other one that I did, what I did was I attached the ears to the basket before I sewed the sides together so that it was easier to get it in place before I sewed the sides together. So I might make another one and I'll insert some footage of that. What I did was I attached the ears to the flat version of my basket piece, and then I sewed the sides together. But because I didn't do that when I made this one, oopsies, I did it in the wrong order, I'm going to sew my ear pieces onto my basket. I'm going to attach my ears to my basket now by sewing it using a straight stitch, and I'm just going to sew right across the edge. It will show through on the front, but it doesn't matter because it will blend in using the same thread as your felt. And I'm going to place the ear maybe about 1 centimeter down from the top of the basket and in the middle of each of the 2 sections that are next to each other, just like this. So I was able just then to sew a straight stitch to attach the ear to the basket, but it was easier the one that I made before this when I made my test run. I sewed the ear on when my basket piece was still flat, and that was easier to kind of get in and get the angle to attach the ear. So I would recommend that. Have your basket piece flat and sew your completed ear onto the basket piece before you sew the sides of your basket together. If you're using the pattern that I made, I'll make sure to write the instructions out the easiest way possible instead of the mistake that I just made then. I now have my lining completed and hemmed, and I have my basket piece all attached together and the ears completed and attached to my basket. And I still have my handle piece, which you don't really need to do much with, and we're ready to attach it all together. We're going to place our lining piece inside the basket so that the right side is up and visible and the wrong side is against the internal part of the felt. With the lining placed on the inside, I am matching up the seam on the outside basket piece to the seam on the lining, and also making sure that they are flat on the top as well. And I'm using Wonder Clips to attach them together. You could use just a pin or any other sort of clip that you've got. And I'm working my way around each of the sides, attaching a pin or a clip to hold the lining against the outside of the basket. So now that my lining has been clipped in place, that is looking all nice, but I also need to attach my handle. Now I found that you can't just pin both sides of your handle in place and sew around it because it gets in the way of your sewing machine. So what I found to be the best strategy was to pin my handle in place over here, the next quadrant over, not quadrant because that means 4, hexagon section. We're going to pin our handle in place over here on the next section over from the ears. So as I top stitch along my basket, I'm going to start on this side here so that I can top stitch 2 ears and then one side of the handle, each of them being in a section next to each other. And then I'm going to sew 2 blank sides together. And then as I get to this 6th section, I'm going to place the handle inside before I sew it in place, which will mean it's not in the way as I'm sewing the other sections together. So this is what it looks like before I top stitch it. I have my 2 ears next to each other and the handle attached on one side here with the lining pinned in place. As I top stitch along the basket, it will attach the lining to the outside of the basket and it will also attach the handles in place. When I'm sewing over the handles, I'm actually sewing forwards and then backwards and forwards again so that it's attached really securely, because they're going to be a point where there'll be a lot of pressure as the child is holding the basket and using it. I also like to place a pin over here where my other side of my handle will be, so that as I'm sewing around the basket, when I come to the pin, I know that I need to pull the handle over and sew it in place where that pin is. So the pin is just a reminder that I need to attach the handle on that side. Once you have finished top stitching the lining together, it should look like this. And you're going to need to press it out nice and flat, and I like to poke my finger in where these points are to make it a really nice shape. We're going to cut off any loose threads from our top stitching, and then our basket is all complete with the lining attached on the inside, the cute little ears sticking up and also lined, and our handle attached. So there is our completed basket. I'm really pleased with this pattern, and I think these baskets have turned out to be super cute, but here's a bit of a video footage of what our kids think of these baskets. Here are our completed Easter baskets all ready to go. This one here is for Ruben and the other kids are all holding theirs. Can you hold them up to the camera so we can see? They're all ready to go for an Easter egg hunt. So while I talk to the camera, how about you guys go find some plastic Easter eggs?
Yeah.
Okay, off you go.
Yeah.
Can you do an Easter egg hunt?
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed learning how to make our Easter baskets, and if you do make one as well, I'd love to see a photo of it, so tag me on Instagram at mymummakes.marie, or any of the other projects you make inspired by my videos. I'd love to see them too. Don't forget to subscribe so you can come back next week and see the Easter outfit I'm making for Ruben, our 6-week-old. And if you've liked this video, please press like or share it with a friend that you think might like to watch it too. Remember, if you're interested in the pattern for this, it's linked in the description box. Sorry, honey. And until next time, go get creative, and I'll see you later.